Hi, everyone. Welcome to our series, Service Unscripted. This is episode one, Why Service Breaks Without Connection. I want to welcome our expert and the CEO of Dispatch, Pat Burns. Hi, Pat.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Marie.
Hi. We're excited to have you here today to talk about why service delivery seems to suffer when the service relies on contractors. So I'm going to start with a big picture question, and then from there, we'll talk about what's really happening in the field.
Yeah, sounds great.
Great. So a lot of companies are relying on third-party service providers today, like contractors, affiliates, and networks. What happens when they try to manage those providers like they would an internal field team?
Yeah, first thing I think it's important to acknowledge that outsourced service delivery and third-party service delivery is becoming more and more pervasive. And the reasons are because it's difficult for enterprises to grow effectively, to deal with elastic demand, or to have a really scalable economic structure for their workforce. So, we have diminishing skilled trade labor to begin with. And so all of those things are making this more common and more necessary. But, the reason that it breaks and sort of doesn't work if you're not making some kind of adjustment to how you practice field service is because if you use the traditional tools and process, it breaks, right? Primarily because if you don't have end-to-end process control, but you need the same quality and consistency. So you lose visibility the moment a job is assigned. You can't enforce standards the same way you would with your own employees. Providers also have a poor experience. For them, they're forced into inefficient workflows. They have to double enter data. They have to use multiple systems. And it's frustrating for them because it's actually harder to perform work well into the standards that they want to achieve as well. And then, of course, the end customer feels it the most, even if they don't know why or can't explain it. And the operation kind of gets stuck in a reactive mode. You don't have enough skilled providers, the network is maxed, and it just creates domino effects of other service inconsistencies. And onboarding new providers is expensive and slow. Even when you want to move fast and flexible, maintaining that quality is a challenge. So you really need systems that help you grow your network and ensure that every provider is equipped and familiar with the standards from day one.
Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, every single part of the service cycle feels it, but especially the enterprise feels like they might be in charge, but they are actually blind to what's happening.
Exactly. They want to be the ones in charge, but they're the ones who feel the impact when something goes wrong, even when that work was done by a third party. So you don't have full visibility into what actually happened. You don't have complete control from the start, but the customer still sees that brand as the experience.
Mhm. That makes sense. So when teams are working with these third-party networks, what does that pain actually look like in their day-to-day operations?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a day in the life, you assign that job to a contractor and you're almost instantly in the dark. Uh, Teams and the end customer are stuck calling, emailing, or texting to find out what happened. There's no real-time visibility into job acceptance, schedule, assignment. You can share your process, as the brand, but it's really hard to enforce it step by step. You can't train these providers the way you would your own team. You're not paying their paychecks. Jobs get done differently and inconsistently depending on who's doing them. Every provider is kind of doing their best to follow their own practice, their own process, and so the quality is inconsistent. And the operation ends up reacting to issues instead of really proactively managing performance and driving growth. And the enterprise is accountable for SLAs and the customer experience, but then doesn't have the ability to control that and to achieve the outcomes that they want. Um, and, and again, it also explains why the providers feel like they're taking orders instead of, doing what they do best and solving problems. And then ultimately, the end customers who feels that pain the most. They just want their service obligations met, regardless of who it is.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And just thinking about that and expanding on it a little bit more, we've talked about sort of what this looks like and feels like, but I'm curious a little bit more about the why. So why is this breakdown happening?
Well, essentially, you've got a different model of service delivery, outsourced, third party, non-dedicated, but you're using the same process and tools that were designed for traditional W-2 service delivery. And so those tools really aren't what you need to maintain and grow your operations. They were built for the dedicated internal teams when that was sort of the only model or the predominant model. They assume you unilaterally control the schedule, the workflows, and the people. They're designed to optimize enterprise operations, not to align the enterprise, the provider, and the customer in a shared experience. But when you're working with these non-dedicated providers like contractors, independent service organizations, the assumptions that you've built the old model on fall apart, and you just can't optimize what you don't control.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like you're saying that most available FSM software out there is not built for contractor networks.
Yeah, that's why we exist. And they weren't designed for the kind of flexibility, visibility, and coordination that modern and future service networks require for this type of delivery.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that shift a little bit. If the legacy tools that are out there weren't built for this, what is the solution and what does the right model look like now?
Yeah, so we came up with a phrase for this because I think it's important to have a distinction between the traditional model, and we call it service orchestration. The best thing about that is, it's not a marketing driven phrase, it's a descriptive conceptual expression of what it is. And it starts with all of the core well-known and well-understood aspects of traditional field service management practice, but then service orchestration includes all of the things that need to happen around those for it to be effective. And so it's really about creating service harmony, where enterprises can maintain standards, providers can grow their business responsibly and healthy, and customers get a consistent five-star experience. So, it's not about ripping out your CRM or your ERP or your customer system of record. It's really about service orchestration representing the layer that connects those systems of records and all the data, all the workflow, all the business process across a distributed service operation. So, we it as a way to bring the enterprise, the provider, and the customer into alignment, thus harmony, orchestration, so that everybody can do their part and you can focus on growth and high performance. It gives you sort of a framework to build the right network, to assign and manage those jobs effectively, to guide the work on site, to monitor quality and progress, and then ultimately to understand how and why you're doing that and where you can improve.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And service orchestration definitely helps to bring some structure to the network, like you were explaining. I'm curious if you can get a little bit more into the specifics, like what this actually looks like operationally.
Yeah, so what does it look like operationally? I think from a high level, the key is it's really not about micromanagement. It's more about connection and coordination. It's about bringing structure to a network that's inherently fragmented and independent. And so, what does that look like? We break it up into four parts. I think this is a really helpful way to think about it. And again, it starts with the core field service management aspects, but then these are the things that need to happen around that for orchestration to be effective. So the first is establishing the network, right? You have to recruit providers who have the capabilities, the trade coverage, the industry expertise that you need, and the familiarity. This is really important with an outsourcing motion to receive and deliver work. They need to be able to accept work and comply with your process. And so, having effective onboarding and digital tools to help them get ramped quickly, coordinating quality standards and capacity expectations, and then training on your tools and business processes. So that's the first quadrant. And the second would be management and really about control and execution, coordination without micromanaging. And so this is really about assigning work based on skill, availability, performance, other arbitrary business rules that are part of your executive priority, not just location. It's about standardizing how work gets done so it can be delivered consistently with exceptional quality across the network and monitoring SLAs and other service standards on a minute-to-minute basis to make sure you're able to identify and escalate issues before they impact the customer.
Mhm.
The next is actually the work getting delivered. So, the day of service when the tech shows up, curb to curb, it's about helping providers succeed and deliver repeatable quality. So, this is not just giving them a description of the job that needs to be done or even instructions on fixing the job. It's about delivering role and potentially work order specific instructions before the job even starts, triaging directly with the end customer, using mobile workflows and checklists that guarantee turnkey compliance. Again, not requiring super heavy, burdensome training and oversight, automatically generating job summaries and other data around the work that's completed that will follow the work order downstream, and then really building an upskilling and feedback performance over time so that you can improve and understand customer satisfaction. And then the last quadrant is really analytics, right? It's super critical to understand what the outcomes are and what is driving them. So, this is really not just about on a day-to-day basis, what is the operational disposition of your service delivery? It's about measuring trending performance over time to make intelligent and strategic decisions. So, tracking service delivery by provider, region, job type, severity level, etc. Spot exceptions and gaps, whether it's process, quality, coverage, or training, using real-time insights to make instant adjustments. And so each one of these quadrants reinforces the others and allows you, again, to achieve that sort of full ownership of harmony and service coordination.
Yeah, the parts of service orchestration are sound so important to managing not just a job, but building a system that improves over time.
Yeah, and that's what's critical, right? It's I kind of call it the weather and the climate. The weather is like what's happening today, right? We've got to make sure the trains are running on time. Everyone knows where they need to be. Identify exceptions that need action. But it's also about the climate. What is the long-term trending, longitudinal performance of the network? And so, it can't just be reactive. You need to create a high-performing network that gets smarter and more aligned every day and then helps you achieve your business goals.
Yeah, thank you. So to
Yes.
wrap this up, if someone watching this takes away one thing about why service breaks and how to fix it, what should it be?
Yeah, so, it breaks when the enterprise providers and customers are operating in isolation. And that's why service orchestration is required to bring them together. That's what creates the harmony across the entirety of the service lifecycle. It strengthens the network instead of straining it. Every job is completed to the brand standards and to the expectations of the end customer, and the entire operation is tracked in real time in a single pane of glass. So it really contributes to long-term performance improvement and growth across the board.
Great. Next episode, we're going deeper into the enterprise perspective of visibility and control. What can people expect?
Yeah, I think, we'll take it a layer deeper. And this is really looking at what visibility really means in a hybrid service model, right? It's even more important to have visibility, yet it's harder to achieve. And so, a lot of teams are kind of flying blind once a job leaves their system. And we'll talk about how service orchestration gives them that real-time oversight without adding complexity or slowing anyone down.
Yeah, thanks so much for these important insights today, Pat. I really appreciate it.
You bet it, Marie. It was fun.
Thanks.